Lila wants me to talk about my book. So, my new book is called War is a Lie, and I'll summarize and we can have discussion and conversation about it. But I wrote it out of frustration with the idea that the Iraq War was somehow unique, that there had never been a war based on lies before, that a president had never misled people about a war before. Very smart, very informed people with this misconception. And it's this idea that we might have a good war, that we might have a just war, that there might be a reason for some wars but not other wars that keeps the war machine in place. And this ever more privatized, more profitable, and ever bigger war machine that is such a huge motivator of more wars. It's the war jobs and the weapons that are driving the wars, rather than the other way around, rather than the way we started this country, where the way the Constitution is written, where we're going to raise and fund an army in order to have a war and then get rid of the army again because we aren't having a war permanently. We are just having a war temporarily. That was the idea. We're long beyond that. We created taxes, income taxes, and progressive income taxes, and estate taxes, and corporate taxes, and taxes on excessive profits for wars, to fund wars, starting with 1812 and up through the war in Korea. Whenever we had a war, we taxed the hell out of rich people and corporations in order to pay for that war. Right? This sort of lost its edge in Vietnam, where President Johnson sort of waited until everybody hated the war to try to pay for it. But when it came to Iraq, we had a whole different approach, where we'll cut taxes on rich people and corporations in order to pay for one of our more expensive and longer-lasting sets of wars. And as a result, we've destroyed the economy. What's left of the economy is the war machine. It's the big... I was just down at the May Day rally interviewing young people there for immigrants' rights and labor rights, and asking them about the peace movement, and them telling me that, you know, all of their friends came to Los Angeles for jobs, working for the war machine, working for these weapons makers. You know, just as when I was in Afghanistan recently, many, if not most, of the people that I would ask in Kabul, where it is much disproportionately the case, people who support the U.S. occupation are taking money from the U.S. occupation. And the fact is that if we put the same dollars into other industries that we put into the war machine, we would have more jobs and better paying jobs without the wars. So one lie is that war is good for our economy and that we need war for our economy. But you know, what I look at in the book is the traditional patterns of lies that get wars going and keep wars going, and the lies that beautify the wars after the fact that weren't mentioned at the time, right? So, you know, we're told about the weapons in Iraq. We go into Iraq. We all understand the weapons thing was a lie, but we cook up some other reasons to keep it going, and we have to keep it going for the troops, and we have to keep going until we complete the mission. And we're now at the same spot in Libya, where even if you buy the argument about having to go in to rescue the people of Benghazi, regardless of whether you recognize the incredible hypocrisy, the impossibility that's the driving force behind the war, and the fact that we're not intervening, we're switching sides, that we've been doing everything wrong for decades, but you think that we should have gone in there, that's come and gone, right? Now we're trying to blow up Gaddafi's house again, like we did in 1986 when we killed his daughter. Now we've killed his son and his grandchildren. And NATO spokesman in the front page of the New York Times today says, well, of course we weren't trying to kill Gaddafi. right? Apparently we were just bombing a civilian neighborhood for no particular reason, and if it happened to kill Gaddafi, so much the better. They will say this in public, so much the better. And what in the world this has to do with protecting people from a massacre is beyond me, right? We are in a potentially decades-long war, civil war, where even if they finally kill the one guy that they're trying to murder, the war will keep going with a martyr. And killing one person in Iraq did not end the war in Iraq. So there are the lies that get wars going, and then there are the lies that are often completely different that keep them going. And often there are completely different lies simultaneously. So you have half the country wanting to kill those evil Iraqis, and half the country wanting the war to benefit those poor Iraqis, whether they are smart enough to know they need it or not. And the same with Libya. You have people who want to kill that evil Gaddafi, and they just happen to fly into this rage of passionate hatred for Gaddafi in the same moment that the US and NATO are going to have a war there. And you have the people who want a humanitarian, philanthropic war. And as both of those excuses will become outdated, there will be other reasons for the war. And when the war ends, if it ever ends, there will be completely new reasons that nobody heard about during the course of the war, just like World War II for saving the Jews. And so at some point, we have to get up to speed. We have to stop having a majority of Americans say yes to a war when they launch it, and then say, I think that never should have been done years later. And we have moved in that direction on Libya faster than any previous war. And that was true with Iraq at one point. But we have a long ways to go. And we have a long ways to go in terms of turning that public opinion into effective action. An action that's not compromised by organizations that sell out to a political party and that refuse to take serious confrontational steps to disrupt the war machine. Is that a good enough start, Lila?
Well, you know, I'm not really here to speak. I'm here to question David, which is so terrifying. I can't begin to tell you. He knows the answer to everything. You know, when you're a talk show host, the thing they caution you about most is be sure to know the answer before you ask the question, you know? And with David, it really is impossible because he's so brilliant. But I am going to ask him a tough question because I often ask myself this question. But we know that war is unthinkable. It's something to which we never should have adjusted. We were talking at the table while we were eating, a few of us, about language. One of the women, it's Jeannie Crescenzo Del Rio, right? Stand up a minute.
Correct.
Where are you? Jeannie, stand up. Let's see you. Jeannie is the head of Amicus, which is trying to help women who, from the military, who are now homeless. Can you imagine the disgrace of allowing our veterans to be homeless? Who are now homeless, trying to put women together so that they can afford to live together in the same houses. They're trying to help house women from the military, and the hope to expand it into just trying to house people who are not housed, period. I think it's a great grassroots idea, and I'm certainly going to put it on my show. But we ask ourselves, when we see things like what happened in Libya, when we see what happened in Darfur, when we see what happened under Idi Amin in Uganda, when we see what happened in Bosnia, when we see these wholesale slaughters, and people say, well, America, you've got, you know, more arms than all the other countries put together. You've got all this power. Why aren't you helping these people? And those of us in this room who stand for peace, who really have the intelligence to understand that there is nothing in war except more violence, we have to come up with an answer. And so far, we haven't. So I thought I would put this question, which is very tough to answer, to David. and see what his answer is. We saw what was happening, let's start with Libya. We saw what was happening in Libya. There was no question that Gaddafi just rained down on his people and slaughtered them wherever he could. I mean, he did what Hitler often did. He went in from town to town and started to wipe out the people in those towns. But my question is, what should we have done?
Well, it is a difficult question, and there are a number of ways to look at it. And one, of course, is the question of whether the war makers in Washington, D.C. have any real driving interest in preventing such a slaughter. Because when you look at Iraq, we were the culprits. We're engaging in slaughtering over 1 million people. When you look at Afghanistan and Pakistan, when you look at the places around the world where we're slaughtering innocent people, the way we could prevent it wouldn't require any sort of innovative thinking or new strategy or new technology. We just stop killing them, right? We're the ones doing it. And when you look at Libya and how the United States greenlights Saudi Arabia to go into Bahrain to kill civilians, to get Saudi Arabia's support for us to go into Libya to supposedly prevent the killing of civilians, there's something very twisted about it. And there's something wrong with this whole framework of should we go intervene in Libya to help people when we can't. We're already in there. We've been funding and supporting and providing weapons to Gaddafi right up until the moment we turn against him. Just as in the rest of the region, all of the dictators were continuing to support and fund and provide weapons to. We are overwhelmingly the world's weapons supplier. We fight these wars against U.S.-made weapons. We arm countries against other countries that have U.S.-made weapons. And so, you know, the easy way to answer a question of what do you do in a crisis is to say what you should have done for the past decade to avoid the crisis, right? And there, you know, I can easily answer. We should have cut off these dictators. We should not have been propping them up and arming them for so many years. And we should instead have been investing heavily in actual aid and actual nonviolent strategic support. People in Egypt were training for years, working with American nonviolence trainers to strategize and organize and build a force that could overthrow a violent dictator without violence, much more quickly, effectively, and in a much more long-lasting way, with less damage done. And you see President Obama turn against that dictator after he stepped down. And we've seen the same in Tunisia, and we see progress in Yemen and elsewhere. And it comes to Libya, and there's this desire to step in and be part of the opposition and be in control of the new government and back the new force that's going to run Libya, or at least half of it, and turn against Gaddafi. And so the motivations are completely questionable, and yet you'll still have people who will agree with all of that and still say, yeah, but he was going to kill people, so we had to go in. And, you know, it's very much debatable. It's very hard to know who to believe, whether to believe the claims of these rebels who've been working with the CIA and are now led by a CIA guy imported from Virginia, whose facts carry the day. But there are going to be cases where somebody is about to slaughter a bunch of people, and you could certainly argue that we ought to intervene and prevent that slaughter, or better yet, that we ought to have a respectable international peacekeeping force independent of the Pentagon that could step in and prevent that slaughter. But even if you buy that in the case of Libya, what the hell are we still doing there now?
Well, it sounds like an impossible question to answer. And yet we need to come up with an answer for our movement, because we, the people in this room, those of us who genuinely believe that war is not an alternative. You know, my father said, war, this is how he defined it, war is one stranger killing a second stranger for the profit and power of a third stranger. And that, I think that really sums it up. So we recognize that, and we are all on the side of the angels, as it were, and we all want to come up with something. And I think it's really time that we came back with a program that had actual mandates. For example, mandate number 1: it is illegal for the United States to sell arms to foreign countries. Mandate number 2: it is illegal for the United States to send any of our citizens into a war where we have not first been physically attacked. And third, it is illegal to enter a war without a popular vote. And I really think that we have to come up, I'm just winging this, but while David was talking, it occurred to me that of course we set this up with Gaddafi because we've been providing him with arms. He used to be our friend, remember that? We liked him. We loved Saddam Hussein, remember that? Remember how we loved Noriega? We were even friendly with Milosevic, for God's sake. I think if we look back at all of these dictators, I mean, it's a pattern. You know, we woo these guys when we need them, we supply them with arms, and then when they become too strong, so that they either endanger us, or when our economy is sluggish and we need somehow to jazz it up, we do jazz it up with a war. I don't agree with David entirely about the economy. I think we do have a permanent war economy. We do. And we call upon it, we push that button every chance we have. But we, who are on the other side, have got to come up with mandates, with a program. And we have to not just wring our hands about our past behavior, but we have to avoid future behavior. But getting back now to Libya.
I agreed with that.
Yeah.
Why?
No, I said I think that the country has a permanent war economy. You do agree with that? I thought you just got through saying it's not just a matter of money that brings us into these wars.
Well, no, I agree with that as well. It's not just a matter of money that brings us into the wars.
Well, then what is it a matter of?
Well, it's a matter of money. It's a matter of desire to control the world, to have bases and weapons based in places from which to attack additional countries. It's a
matter of empire.
We're all marginalized in the process. It's a function of the electoral calculations of politicians who think war is good for their careers, and it's a measure of the irrational machismo and power lust of people in power. There's all kinds of corrupting forces on top of that. They don't think there's any, you can't point to any one cause for any war, because there's always a package. But if I could just say, Lila, about your mandates, which I think are excellent, at least number 2 out of 3, we've got. You know, war is illegal. But how do we enforce these laws? When Buck McKeon, whose district is just north of here, whom people should really pay a visit to sometime, has a bill in Congress to give President Obama absolute power to make war anywhere, anytime, and to imprison anyone, anywhere, anytime, until the permanent war on terror is over. And this is Buck McKeon from the party that pretends to not believe Obama was born in the country and that he's not a slave of the Soviet Union and so forth. I mean, all of these pretenses of disagreement between the two parties, these guys are trying to change the laws to fit the practice, which is already that we have wars anywhere, anytime, and imprison anybody, anywhere, anytime.
Yeah, you know, I'm not going to linger on this economic aspect of why we have wars. I think all of the other things that you mentioned are subdivisions of that. First, we got to be rich. That's the first thing. And once you're rich, it is true. Wealth gives you power. Power gives you the desire for empire. All of these things are fallouts from being very, very rich, you know. But the truth is that if there wasn't profit in war, if we were not allowed to sell war to foreign countries, if we were mandated to keep all of our arms here, that process would begin the process of making war less attractive. And you've got to start somewhere, and I really feel that we have to adopt that as a beginning. And then there also is the language that makes war attractive to us, ordinary people. Not us, because we're not ordinary people. You know, we are informed people. Have a lot of respect for us. I really think we're quite wonderful. And when we talk about people serving their country, I think of us. When America talks about serving their country, they think of people who join the armed forces and kill other people and get killed themselves. And I think this is something that we also have to fight against, have to work against, and have to speak against. We have to stand up and say, let's use a different expression. Let's use, these are the naives, the ones who go and fight and kill strangers. These are the naives, or these are the desperates. These are the people who can't get a job. These are the people who want to pay their mother's mortgage. These are the people who feel disenfranchised. These are the people who need young people who need a family. And where else will they find a club so intense as the military? These are not the people who are driven to serve, because the people who are driven to serve are David Swanson, Marcy Winograd,